Yes, we are at Fiorano and to test drive this, the F8 Tributo. Now, as you can see, it's quite a wet day, but I don't think anything can dampen my mood. First up, we've got a couple of hot laps out on the test track, and after that, it's up into the hills in Maranello to drive this guy. So, what are we waiting for? Let's get going. Now before I begin, let me just say that in case you get confused with the mix of bright sunshine and gloomy weather footage over the course of this video, well, that's because the Italian weather was being moody. So, while it was bright and sunny while the exterior was being shot, it of course began pouring when I began to drive. Luckily though, there is a wet mode among the various settings you can select on the Manettino switch. The weather is it's raining, but it's not heavy enough, so the track is wet with a lot of rubber marbles, and we've been warned not to get this guy out of wet. Let me see if I feel brave enough. I'll probably do that, but maybe not. Now, you know, this engine is turbocharged, and well, we very often go about saying, yeah, there's that hint of turbo lag, and well, you can feel it at times, but honestly here, it's instant. Power delivery is really instant. There is no turbo lag. I mean, I would have loved to say, yeah, there is a little bit of it, but nope, Ferrari have that down perfectly. Power just comes in instantly as you accelerate. It's really, really amazing. Now, yeah, do you miss well, the naturally aspirated unit? Yeah, only when it comes to the sound. It obviously doesn't sound as great as the 458, which was my first Ferrari that I drove. But I can tell you this, honestly, it still sounds good. I mean, don't get me wrong. That would be silly to say this car doesn't sound good. Something like trying to say, well, Bon Jovi doesn't sound as good as Freddie Mercury. I mean, believe me, this car is a rock star in its own right as far as sound is concerned. The engine here is basically the 488 Pistas, and it's been fettled for duty in the F8. There's an identical 720 horses and 770 Newton meters of torque, and it also uses the lightweight components like the titanium connecting rods and the crankshaft and flywheel. And there's also the Iconel exhaust system. Speaking of which, the F8 is the first Ferrari to use a gasoline particulate filter, and yes, it meets our BS6 norms. So, I did put it in sport mode, but only very briefly. A couple of twitches at the rear end made me go back to the wet mode setting. Well, I hope the hills would be better. Okay, so out here in the hills, what can I tell you? Well, the first thing I'd like to talk about is the suspension, because the roads here are pretty bumpy actually. The surface isn't perfect, so it's a great place to get a feel for, well, how the car would be like in India. And I can tell you something, it's actually surprisingly good. There's none of that bone-jarring, harsh ride really that you'd expect in a car with this level of performance. It actually does quite well, and that's even in the regular mode. If you move to bumpy road, like I did right now, it actually gets quite usable. As for the insides, it's pretty similar to the GTB. The central tacho is flanked by two screens, and on the passenger side there is a narrow 7-inch touchscreen now. Of course, like all new Ferraris, the controls are all on the steering wheel instead of stalks. Every element of the dash has been redesigned, but it's the air vents that are most distinguishable. Now circular and looking like the exhaust end of a jet engine. Now, as I told you earlier, the weather isn't really all that great, and I don't know if you can tell, but if you look out the window you can see it's quite misty and there's a lot of fog right now. Visibility, well, that's down to something like 15-20 meters really up here in the hills with all of the clouds and the rain, but I'm still having a ball. Okay, so I've come further down where, well, the cloud cover is thinner and visibility is better, so hopefully we'll have a little better soundtrack. Boy, these roads are still slippery, and I'm having to pay a lot of attention, so you'll forgive me if I'm not speaking too much. But the tight and narrow hills also let me appreciate the steering on the F8. It's simply phenomenal. It's absolutely precise, very quick, and it doesn't feel too nervous. Cars sometimes tend to feel a little too nervous when they are this quick and this responsive. But I think Ferrari have really nailed the steering. It's just simply amazing. Now the V8 in this car, well, it is a award-winning engine, and with good reason. I mean, power delivery is fantastic, and even when you're out here in the hills, you can drive along and just, well, basically relax, or you can push hard. It basically does anything that you want it to with no fuss, no drama at all. Which bodes very well for us in India, a very usable supercar. It won't be cheap, of course. Prices start at 4.02 crore ex-showroom India, but as you've seen, it drives well and sounds pretty decent too. And while it betters its predecessor in terms of performance, this time it's with the aesthetics too. Like the 488 GTB, there's plenty of aero detailing, but it all looks good now. The curvy nose looks sleek, and the S-duct forces the air over the bonnet for downforce and also adds a neat sporty touch. At the rear, Ferrari returned to the twin circular lamps and a clear slotted Lexan polycarbonate rear window, inspired, or I should say paying tribute to another mighty V8 engine Ferrari, the F40. But all this aside, there is perhaps just one reason to own one. With the upcoming SF90 powered by plug-in hybrid tech, this is perhaps the last pure internal combustion mid-engine Ferrari. And for that reason alone, you should get one.